Hello, I'm Ronnie Eldridge. Welcome to Eldridge and Company. Making New York City the most accessible city in the world is what the Mayor's Office for People with Disabilities is committed to doing. Victor Calise is their advocate and commissioner, and he's my guest today. Welcome.
Well, thank you for having me here, Ronnie. I greatly appreciate it.
So tell me about this incredible job you're doing.
Well, like you said, we're working to make New York City the most accessible city in the world, and sometimes people laugh at that because of all the infrastructure that we have, but we're committed to doing that. The de Blasio administration has made a commitment to serving everyone, and people with disabilities are part of that process. Our office has been around since 1972, and it was originally named Office of the Handicapped,
right.
And the H word is no longer said,
right.
So that was changed under Dinkins to Office of People with Disabilities, and under the Bloomberg administration, it was raised to the commissionership because prior to that, it was just executive director. Yeah. So there's parity now across every agency with me.
Almost 1 million people in the city, right?
Yep, 948,000 people according to NYC planning.
Now, if you added elderly people, say over 85 and over, it's another 250,000, I think. Probably. I was looking. And if you go to 80, it's another 50,000. And interests, I mean, there are broad interests that are common to all kinds of people.
Absolutely. And those are people that have just disclosed. If we think about it, the number is even higher. So we're probably close to 2 million people with varying disabilities across the city. And everyone needs to be able to be part of the city because the city has so much to offer.
Well, you have to be able to. There's no equity in the world, right? There's no justice if you can't participate.
Right. And prior to the Americans with Disabilities Act in 1990, people with disabilities were fighting and advocating for those rights.
I remember them. I remember the 504 Democratic Club.
Yep.
It used to come and picket and this and that and everything else. They were very convincing and very strong. And also New York was one of the leaders. I don't think it was absolutely the leader in the whole movement to begin to pay more attention to disability rights, the rights of disability. It started out west, didn't it?
Well, it started out west, but there were strong advocates in New York City to really push the agenda and say enough's enough, right? We want to get on buses. We want to get in trains. We want the access to parks and playgrounds.
We pay taxes.
Right, and that's
so ludicrous when you think about it. When you're talking about it, do you find a general empathy? Do people understand what it means to be disabled? Or I shouldn't say handicapped. No, disabled.
Never the H word. That's right. Some people get it. Some people look at people with disabilities and don't know how to process it. And I think it's important to educate people because ignorance is not good. And
it would be an assignment someplace in one's life to either be in a wheelchair or on crutches.
Well,
you can't become blind and you can't become deaf.
Right, but
you could physically become challenged.
Well, I think everybody has some type of thing that they need to embrace, and embracing disability is tough for some people. Prior to my injury, I used to be a plumber. And as a plumber, I would put in wheelchair accessible bathrooms. And I would follow the codes and standards to put that in, but I never realized what it was like to be disabled. Did I have some empathy? Yes, because my mother was like, make sure everyone's treated equal. And sometimes I was too empathetic.
In Brooklyn, right?
No, I grew up in Queens. I'm a Queens boy.
Oh boy, all right. Oh, that's right. You had an injury in Forest Park.
Yes, I did. Okay. I was downhill mountain bike riding, and I flew over my handlebars into a tree, and I injured my spinal cord. I was about 22 years old when that happened. Yeah. But
it changed
It changed my life.
Yeah.
And it changed it for the better.
Yeah.
I was able to understand what it was like to have a disability. I was able to understand what it was like to navigate the city streets. Access to transportation, access to public parks. So all of those things were really important because I did that before I was injured. And being able to understand it as a person with a disability, it was different. And fortunately for with my injury, I was able to be a paraplegic and have use of my arms and most of my upper body, so I'm able to get around the city in a more efficient way. But there's some people that can't. So that really got to me, and over time I was like, well, how do we figure this out? How do we make things more accessible for people with disabilities? And right now it's a lifelong commitment for me.
Certainly, and people are really lucky to have you there. So this agency, do we call it an agency? I mean, it's sort of an agency in its own. It's an office, but it's an agency.
I like to believe it's the mayor's office for people with
Yeah.
disabilities, but we portray it and push it as an agency.
Yeah.
Because we work with every agency
I was going
across
to say,
the
how
city.
many agencies in the city?
There's over
state?
50,
Yeah.
50 agencies across the city.
Right. You have this wonderful report. You do it every year?
Yes.
Second year. So it really is an inventory of what the things you've done and what your programs are.
Well, it's more of how do we move forward? Where are the problems that exist in our city, and how do we move forward? So this is called Accessible NYC, the State of Persons with Disabilities Living in New York City. And it's really our guideline of how we're going to approach accessibility. We know that transportation is a big issue for people with disabilities. We know that employment for people with disabilities is insane because 77% of people with disabilities in the working age are jobless. So we need to change that.
So terrible.
And then education, making sure that we're transitioning youth from high school into the workplace and into jobs or college. Making sure that healthcare is accessible for people with disabilities. Keeping people healthy is really important too. And making sure they have access to everything the city has to offer. I think one of the most important things that we've done with Accessible NYC is disability service facilitators. It was a local law passed by Helen Rosenthal, and it really was to have agencies appoint a disability service facilitator in each agency, because each agency has a role to play.
Part of it, yeah.
There's disability
It's
related
amazing,
to everything.
isn't
In parks, we have to look at playgrounds, and I've
That's what
said
you did.
that.
Yeah.
Department of Transportation, making sure that Vision Zero includes accessibility. The cultural plan, making sure that they have people with disabilities included in that.
Right, it's amazing. So now you've got, do you meet with all the department, those heads?
Yes.
I mean, those people?
We like to, we want to make sure all those disability service facilitators are the most educated as possible, making sure that they know exactly what cutting edge technology is out there, because we want accessible smart cities. We want to ensure that they know how to do trainings in their agencies to make sure that we can build acceptance and tolerance in the workplace for people with disabilities. So we train these disability service facilitators. We give them the tools that they need to succeed.
Do you train other people outside of the city government?
Absolutely. We have our initiative called NYC at Work. It's to touch 2,100 people with disabilities, connect 1,500 people to jobs or internships, and employ 700 people in a job of their choice for a year. So when we do that, we want to make sure that businesses understand what it's like to provide for a reasonable accommodation. And we set up a business development council. We have businesses from every sector, from finance to transportation. And city government has a role to play in this, technology, healthcare. So we really want to be as broad as we can. But it's not just about having businesses there. We also need to ensure that we can find the talent. Because some of the problem that businesses have are finding the talent. Well, we know in the city universities alone, there are 9,000 students with disabilities. And those are people that have self-disclosed. That doesn't count all the private colleges like Pace and Fordham and St. John's University. And there are kids with disabilities that are living there as well. So we want to ensure that we're connecting, finding those people, making sure that they're prepared for work, and being able to place them in the jobs that those businesses have.
How realistic do you think that's going to be?
Oh, it's realistic already. We're doing it. We've received money from, it's the first public-private partnership for disability employment. So we have Poses Family Foundation, institutes that are really interested in being involved in us. And it's really about collaborating with everybody to really make a change, because once we're able to employ people with disabilities, we're able to take advantage of some of the things that the mayor has put in place, specifically housing. When we hear about housing and affordable housing, there's accessible affordable housing. But accessible affordable housing, you need to be able to make money. And to be able to do that, jobs are really important.
So people who are not employed and are disabled, Are they on SSI? How do they live?
Yeah, there's Social Security disability that they live on Social Security income and
Medicaid.
And Medicaid. And
now what's happening with that kind of, the Medicaid? Is the state the largest contributor to it?
yes, the state is, and the state does a good job of providing services for people with disabilities, home care aides, assistants, excuse me, that are able to help them at home so they can live their lives. Some people need that, some people don't. And it's really about, when we're looking at it, it's like, okay, how do we make sure that people know that they can still go to work and still keep those, still keep their Medicaid. There's Medicaid buy-in programs. And we want to be able to really be able to educate people. We want to financially empower people.
So you work on that. You connect
Yes, we do.
people.
So
if you're not providing the total information or guidance, you're connecting.
Well, we're working, so what we have is something called Empowered Cities. And that's something City with an I has funded, and it's a $2 million initiative where we want to be able to we want to ensure that people with disabilities are empowered. And the way that they're empowered is we're going to train people within our financial empowerment centers to understand what empowered means and what resources are out there. Like, people are not aware that they can have a job and still keep their Medicaid and be able to buy into that Medicaid buy-in program. That's really important. We want to make sure that people are educated about that. So really training our financial empowerment centers to understand what disability is, and it's consistent across the board to be able to do that. So we can meet people with disabilities of where they're at in their lives. Either they're transitioning from high school into the workplace, educating their families, or they're just looking for a job. We want to make sure that they're empowered.
Now, transportation, assessor ride.
Yes.
When I was active in the city government, assessor ride, you had to order it personally, and it came, and everybody complained about how long and blah, blah, blah. You can still order it, I guess, personally, can you?
Yeah, well, there's a couple, there's a lot of...
You've got a whole new route now. I mean, it's all different.
Yeah, so there's a lot
Explain
of great things that are happening in this space. Accessoride, they make 25,000 trips a day. And the way it's set up, it's a shared ride system. So if I'm a person, if I'm a person with a disability and I live in the Bronx and I have to get to a meeting, I have to get to an appointment or to work in Manhattan, I may have to make 2 other stops before I get to where I am. But that's the way the system's set up. And Accessoride understands that, and they understand the complexity of that, and they're trying new things. We've been very fortunate here in the city to add accessible taxis on the street. By the year 2020, 50% of the yellow cabs will be accessible.
How many are now? It's a large number.
Yeah, we're about 1,500 wheelchair accessible taxis, and wait times have certainly gone down. We have an accessible dispatch, a citywide accessible dispatch, where people can get it at any time.
Is that voluntary, or do they have to convert?
As far as the yellow cabs, they have to convert.
But the other cab, the other livery call, whatever you call them.
Yeah, the for-hire vehicles.
Yeah.
So we, the City of New York, have passed some rules to include accessibility in the for-hire vehicle sector. So more accessible taxis and for-hire vehicles will be coming on the street. So the city's been very progressive, and the Taxi and Limousine Commission has really pushed that agenda forward. And we're working with a coalition of for-hire vehicles to really increase accessibility. And with that, Accessoride has been trying to find out ways to leverage those wheelchair accessible taxis, and they have pilot programs that they're using right now to really streamline the system in a more efficient way.
Let's go back to housing.
Yes.
The new tax bill, I gather, no longer provides a tax assistance or an abatement or an exemption, whatever it's called, for businesses that change things to accommodate people with disabilities. That is a complicated way.
Yeah, there is a tax credit for if a business makes their facility accessible. There is a tax credit. I heard that is.
It's out.
It's out, yeah. But there's a lot of things on the tax bills.
Does that go towards the housing also, if you renovate an apartment?
Well, there's a lot of affordable housing That's happening right now. If we look at the, and all under housing, urban development, and all of what Mayor de Blasio has been pushing. So what happens right now with affordable housing, accessible affordable housing, is 5% of that housing is set aside for people with disabilities. So what we've been able to do with the housing plan is to ensure that accessibility is there, making sure that people with disabilities know that they can apply for accessible affordable housing, that they can go to Housing Connect, and they have a disability-specific housing that the application is actually set on the side, and it's really important for people to understand that. But more importantly, again, they can't get access to that house if they don't have jobs, and that's a common. You're going to hear me talk about this and continue to say it's really about employment.
And a job is so essential.
A job makes everybody who they are.
Right.
And if you think about the jobs that you've had, they've defined who you were at some period in your time.
Yeah, right, and they were all accidental, but it's all right. Now, the homeless, what happens there?
People with disabilities are homeless, and what we're doing is ensuring that our homeless shelters are accessible for people with disabilities. So we have a big initiative, and we continue to ensure that accessibility standards are being met through Human Resource Administration.
The veterans, you work with them. Are they part of your population?
Absolutely. Veterans with disabilities are happen from, unfortunately, all the wars that we have here. They've dedicated their lives to serving our country, and we want to ensure that when they come to our office that we're working with them in the best way to either get housing, to be able to get jobs, or just anything that they actually need throughout the city.
So that's a whole other agency that you...
Well, we work, we work with the Department of Veterans Affairs closely, and sometimes people make their way through our office, through them, or just happen to find the mayor's office with people with disabilities. But either way, we're there to help serve our veterans.
There's some remarkable new programs that you're creating. So what's some of them? If you have a hearing problem.
Yes, so if you're deaf, we have something called American Sign Language Direct, that you're able to get to our office and be able to communicate with a person through sign language. You can do that through a relay system that we have a video relay that we have directly set up, and it's just really quick and easy.
So how do you connect that?
You connect, you can call 311, and the website, you can find everything at nyc.gov/disabilities, and you'll find out exactly how to connect to us.
So there's a way that you can put on your screen?
Yep.
And talk.
It's basically like FaceTime.
Yeah, yeah.
And be able to connect someone directly through a FaceTime app and be able to certainly connect.
How many people do you think that would that
helps? We've just launched this, but there are.
Do you break down what some of the disabilities are?
We do have the disabilities broken down by specific disability. And I don't know the specific number off the top of my head of people who are deaf and hard of hearing.
You can't, I don't know.
Yeah, well, we do. We have some idea of that.
And then for people who have trouble seeing, there are other projects, right?
Yes.
For walking and...
Yeah, wayfinding is certainly one of the things that we want to be able to do for people with visual disabilities. It's something called accessible pedestrian signals. And you may hear them on the street as you're walking down. You hear something beeping, and there's some sounds that come out. And what it does, when a person with a visual disability hears that, they walk towards that, and they could hit a button, and all of a sudden it will alert them of when and when not to cross the street. They're called accessible pedestrian signals. We've increased and continue to find ways to increase the number of those that are on the street. And it's all part of the Vision Zero initiative to really be able to safely get people across the street without being injured. We don't want to create any more injuries. We want to, Vision Zero is about stopping injuries.
Right. And then what I wondered was special ed. Some of the people in special ed are there because, I mean, what happens? There's a mainstreaming of people with disabilities, right, into the regular classrooms, but there are also some people in special ed.
Well, we want to be able to integrate children with disabilities into the most integrated setting as possible within our Department of Education. Because people with disabilities, if they're not seen, they're not heard. And when does it really start? It starts at a young age. So integrating children with disabilities into into the most integrated, into the classroom, just so other people understand it. They can grow up with disabilities. They'll understand it, so we don't have to worry about beating down a stigma. They'll know what it is to work with a kid who has autism, or a kid who is in a wheelchair, a kid with a visual disability, or a kid with a hearing disability. We want it broad. We want a part of everything that the city has to offer, because it's really, at the core of it, it's about teaching kids when they're young, because when they grow up, they know. Right. And that people with disabilities are what? They're normal. Because that's what people with disabilities are, normal.
Right. That's a wonderful way of putting it, right?
Yeah.
So you started, I mean, your first job, was it in the Parks Department?
So my first job with the city was through the Parks Department, and I worked to make parks accessible for people with disabilities. And I did that on a broad scope. It was through their design and construction. It was through the recreation programs that they provide, and really educating the staff. And I worked there for 6 years, and it was probably one of the greatest jobs I've ever had. We made beaches accessible. To this day, you can get out on accessible path onto the beach. We have beach wheelchairs that people can get around on the beach. Our playgrounds and our design features, I would argue that New York City happens to be one of the most accessible park systems in the country, of all the new design that we have and all the great landscape architects that we have that are looking at accessibility. And it's not just about having a ramp, because some ramps lead to nowhere. We're about moving through the space, and some of the great designs we have are the person with the disability can actually move through the space, or a grandparent with the disability will be able to navigate that space with someone. It's about color contrast and hearing and vision, and making sure that all of it is encompassed. Quiet areas for kids with autism, swings for kids with limited mobility. So it's really about a holistic approach and making sure that these park spaces are accessible for kids with disabilities.
So along with the time that you're doing all these wonderful things, you're also connecting with other cities and other countries.
Yes. And
about what they're doing.
Yeah, we, the Mayor's Office of People with Disabilities, meet on a monthly call with cities around the country. To really talk about the issues and what we're struggling with, and how someone is tackling some problem and how we can tackle another. International work is really important to me, and working with the United Nations and other countries. The great part about living in New York City is we have the United Nations. Yeah. And when the Convention on Rights of Persons with Disabilities is in town, people from all around the world come into our office wondering what we're doing. And it's great because everyone cares about New York. Now, of course, this is me being a New Yorker, thinking everyone we're the center of the world. I guess because we are, but that's me being a New Yorker.
Are there any cities that compare? Tell me some of the...
Yeah, London certainly compares. They have the same infrastructure as we do. Same issues we do, working to navigate that. There's the Norwegian countries, Swedish countries do a really good job on, all those Scandinavian countries are really good moving forward. Dubai is certainly...
great big buildings.
Yeah, those great big buildings. We joke we have a competition working to be the most accessible city in the world, and they're committed to doing accessibility in their government buildings by 2020. So Israel's doing some great things on accessibility. Italy has done some good things, and Spain does a lot on tourism. There's accessible tourism, and then we care about people with disabilities in tourism.
How many tourists do you have?
That's really, so right, there's 60 million people that come visit.
How many?
60 million people that come visit New York City every year. We estimate it's about 10% of that, so there's 6 million people with disabilities come and visit New York City every year. We have wheelchair accessible taxis. 100% of our buses are accessible. We have infrastructures like our parks that are accessible. Well, all new buildings that go up have to be accessible for people with disabilities. And we're getting more and more accessible. There's some old structures that we continue to have challenges with, but we have to find creative ways.
You have to make outreach to all the different companies and the New York City tourist agencies and everything else. So
yeah, we work with NYC and Company. They have an accessibility page themselves, and talking about accessibility, working with theater, making sure a person with a disability has access to theater, knowing when they're having American Sign Language shows, knowing if there's hearing loops or hearing assistive listening devices in those venues, what venues are accessible and to what degree. So a Theater Development Fund and the Broadway League have really made a commitment to do that. So we work closely with them. We work with theater to ensure that accessibility is there.
And movie houses?
Yeah, everyone that we possibly can. People that come to us and want to make things accessible, we are there to say, hey, New York, let's make this the most accessible city in the world.
I don't think there's any better way to leave this program, but you're making this whole thing so exciting that brings the energy, right?
Well,
and the excitement to it.
New York City is an
The
exciting
challenge.
place.
Yeah.
And we have to make it accessible.
Yeah. Well, we're lucky to have you there.
Well,
thank you so much. Thank you, Victor.
Thank you, Ronnie.
It's great.
I appreciate
Thank
it.
you. We at CUNY TV always like to hear from our viewers. So if you have any subjects you'd like to explore or people you'd like to hear, please let us know. Write to us at CUNY TV, 365 Fifth Avenue, New York, New York, 10016, or go to our website, cuny.tv, and click on Contact Us. We look forward to hearing from you.